the premise is pretty simple. We're told this from a very young age, that when you come in contact with a sick person, they transmit something to you, a germ, through a cough or a sneeze or physical contact or indirect contact. Maybe they use a spoon or something and then you use their spoon unknowingly and you pick up their germs. Like, we're told this from a very young age and we believe it to be true because inevitably one day we come in contact with someone who's sick and then we get sick. We go, oh, well, that theory must be correct. There must be germs floating around and disease must be passed between people. So demonstrating that phenomena should be relatively straightforward. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to construct a clinical experiment where you get a bunch of healthy people, a bunch of sick people, you put them in a room together and you see what happens.
Mm.
Now, the thing is, these experiments have been done time and time and time again. And contrary to popular belief, people weren't getting sick.
Mm.
So doctors and scientists, despite their best efforts, could not make healthy people sick.
Mm.
I think I found like over 30 experiments where this is what the scientists and doctors did.
Mm.
They just got a bunch of sick people and they put them in close proximity to healthy people and nothing happened. And they went to the next step. It's like, right, well, maybe there's something in their bodily fluids. So they took the bodily fluids out of the sick people and inoculated healthy people with it in every which way. So we're talking about spraying it up into people's noses and dropping mucus into their eyes and in their ears and mouth and nose, injecting it directly into their bloodstream sometimes, underneath the skin, into their muscles. They injected it in every which way. They vaporized it and had people inhale it. And it's this so-called infected mucus. And they never demonstrated that there was anything being passed, an infectious agent being passed from a healthy person to a sick person. It just didn't happen. They couldn't make those conclusions.
Mm.
So that really does fly in the face of the story we were told back in 2020,
Mm.
where fleeting contact with a sick person would mean that you catch their illness and then you're a threat to all the people that are around you in your vicinity, friends, family members, loved ones. So that's a bit of a cop-out to think that like some random guy in the street can walk past a healthy people if he's got a cold, walk past a healthy people and give his illness to a healthy person. That's a cop-out to all of the researchers and scientists who spent decades and untold resources and amounts of money. Often these experiments were done by some of the largest institutions, medical institutions in the world, trying to accomplish this. It's a real
Mm.
cop out to them. It's a slap in the face that they weren't able to do it.
Mm.
Yeah, supposedly you can do it if you're not wearing a mask walking down the street or walking next to someone in the aisle in the shopping center.
Mm.
So what that suggests is that there's something else going on.
Mm.
Now, in those experiments, sometimes people did get sick. So, for example, there are experiments where people coughed up some mucus when they had a cold or a flu. That mucus was collected and then it was exposed to a healthy person in, every which way imaginable. Some of those people did get sick with colds and flus.
Mm.
You may hear this and go, well, that's evidence of transmission.
Mm.
As you pointed out, though, Leigh, there's a number of problems drawing that conclusion from such experiments because they didn't use adequate controls in any of those experiments. They didn't blind the people to the intervention they were getting. There was experimental bias in these studies that were done. So I don't want to like get into the real nitty gritty of all of this, but just to highlight the problems with using that kind of experiment as evidence of transmission when scientists and doctors use saline as a placebo control. They were able to induce colds and flus in healthy people. In some instances, they made people getting saline, like a larger percentage of the people receiving that placebo got sick than the people receiving the so-called infected or sick person's mucus. Like, how is that possible? What that tells us is that there's several things going on. The placebo effect, so a person's expectation, may have induced these symptoms of a cold or flu. They were participating in an experiment. They were expecting to be exposed to flu germs. They got exposed to something. They believed it was flu germs. They got sick, but it was actually saline. So it was their mind that created those symptoms.
Yeah.
But it also could have been like a physical irritation. So the direct consequence of sticking something artificial up someone's nose, that could be like a chemical irritation from the saline. Sometimes they use Ringer's solution, which is like a buffering agent, or it had a phosphate buffer in there. And that is known to induce cold and flu-like symptoms. It could be the act of actually squirting something foreign up the nose. You start sniffling and sneezing and trying to get this stuff out. And that might be misconstrued as a cold or a flu symptom. So, I mean, these are just a couple of the problems that I found with these experiments, but they were never accounted for. And that in itself, because there were no adequate controls being done, means that any of the positive cases that came out of these experiments where people got sick can't be construed as evidence of viral transmission. I know, like, this is a pretty, when we get into this topic, it can be quite technical, and I'm trying to keep it quite high level so people understand this. But yeah, we're just scratching the surface here of the methodological flaws of these experiments, which is kind of sad because, as I said, this phenomena basically ruled our lives. We were locked up in our own homes. We had things enforced upon us, sometimes often inhumane things like quarantine and forced medication under the guise of this being true. Yet the evidence for that is lacking. So if people knew that the evidence was lacking, maybe they would not be so forthcoming in putting their arm out to receive a medication, or to lock themselves up, or to wear a face covering, or to do all these other interventions which supposedly protect them against a so-called contagious illness.
Thanks for watching this video. And if you want to catch the entire episode, head on over to the Radical Health Rebel podcast, where you can subscribe by scanning the QR code on the screen.